There you go. So that is the big question, to host or not to host. And ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the man who led this research and this study. Please welcome Professor Sascha Schmidt.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we always had supporters, great supporters and opponents of Olympic Games. We have seen it in the video, but something has changed. And we heard a lot about change yesterday from Thomas Bach, and we heard a lot about the impact of digitalization on our society. Something is different, and you have seen our students here on stage. So these are digital natives. And you know these guys, our good old days as a professor are over. Yeah? If you have looked at them, they are confident, they are smart, they are demanding, but nobody told us how to deal with them. And it's not only us, so it's not only my daily life in the classroom, it's also at home. So I have 3 boys, and the oldest one is 10 years old, and if I really want to effectively communicate with him, while we are sitting on the lunch or dinner table, I just sent him a WhatsApp message, and that works. So these digital natives, they are always on, they're interconnected, they are media channels themselves, and so they also want to have a say in who is hosting the Olympic Games. And in these new digital realities, a small wind can turn into a storm immediately. And you can ask the mayor of the city of Boston, who experienced that quite recently, by a little bit underestimating the mobilization capabilities of the opponents. And so this is what he said. The opposition, for most part, is about 10 people on Twitter. And we have seen within minutes that these have been much more than 10 people on Twitter, and we all know how the story ended. So here really a small wind turned into a storm immediately. The question now is, and we have seen in the film all the bids who have been rejected. So is it really true that nobody wants to host the Olympics anymore? Is it true that this Boston incident is representative for other cities? And that was a question that was also interesting to the CAMP BECKENBAUER board, who asked us to do a survey that is transnational, has a transnational perspective, and is independent. And we wanted to go beyond referendums and market research. So what did we do? So with the support of Repucom, we set up a study in 12 countries. 11 European countries plus the US, and surveyed 12,000 people overall. This is representative for more than 700 million people. And we wanted not only to simply ask for, do you want the games or do you don't want the games? We wanted to understand, we want to get a profile of the people. So we were asking for, we included psychological tests in there. We were asking about optimism, life satisfaction, but also got details on their income, their education level, and so on. And then with this massive data that we got, we wanted to achieve 2 things. Number 1, we wanted to have a transnational big picture. And second, we wanted to derive practical implications, especially for campaigning and mobilization. And as you have seen, this turned out into this little report, and I guess that you didn't have a chance to escape, because we put it everywhere. Yesterday I talked to a participant. He even told me that he was turning around at night and found in his bed this study. So it was placed there by me. And so I'm sure that you all have read the report and know it by heart. But please let me just to touch on 2 or 3 things that we found of particular interest. So of course, the big question is like, who is really supporting the games, who is against the games, and this for more than 700 million people. So the answer that we got was the following. The answer is yes. So the majority is supporting the Olympic Games. And in 11 out of 12 countries, the supporters were outweighing the opponents. Only in Norway, we found a different picture. So who is against it? 25%, so 1/4. And if you simply do the math, you see it doesn't sum up to 100%. And this was one of the big differences of our study, because we looked at the middle ground. And there's the middle ground of the so-called undecided people. And these undecided people, this is a massive segment. So we are talking about 130 million people above 14 years. And so if you look at the three groups, and if you think about campaigning and mobilization, there are also different strategies that turned out of our research that would be useful. So if you are in favor to host the games, you have the supporters, they are convinced, you don't need to convince them more, it's a question of mobilization. Because we have seen that especially the young generation, they are fans of the Olympic Games, but they are not fans of the ballot box. And so it's about to get them to vote. Opponents, here the question is, should we really invest into to turn the opponents over? And I can tell you, based on our data, this is a difficult task. 41% doesn't even listen to any arguments that are pro-Olympia. So here it's rather about demobilization, because many of them are not really activists. It's more about to integrate them into communication and not to provoke them. And now we have the middle part, the undecided. And we were really curious to see, who are these guys? So are these the rich or the poor? Are these the beauty or the ugly? Are these the young or the old? And I have to disappoint you. These are the ordinary people. And so statistically, we try to find out what is the criteria that is kind of common among these undecided. And we got 5 points. So as I said, these are everyday people. They are often female. The majority is female. At least in Europe, they are less educated than in other parts of the world. And that's interesting, they're quite time constrained. So they don't have time. And they don't take any time to get information about the Olympics. And also they don't invest time to watch sports on different media channels. Yeah? And the time constraints also explains that they are less active in organizations. So the question is like, how can you get the undecided? And there's a good benchmark coming from Obama's presidential campaign in 2012. And they basically did 3 things. Number 1, they applied easy to understand messages. Easy to understand messages. They tailored them to women. And they massively used micro-targeting. So really to get into subgroups and to really tailor the messaging towards them. And if you believe that the undecided might decide who is hosting the Olympics, then it's of value to understand who they are and how they think. But more details, you have the report, and yeah, I think we got some questions. Do we have questions?
I am on. Okay, great. Just a couple of things we wanted to pick up on, and perhaps you could just explain a little bit further. You talked about the undecided, whether these people that aren't quite sure, do they want their country to host an Olympic Games or not? How do you go about trying to convince those people, though, if you were to do that?
Yeah, so if you look in the data, what is important for them in terms of Olympics? So it's the top 3 things are no's. So they don't want any extra burden on the local population, they don't want tax money to be spent, and they don't want any environmental damages. And interestingly enough, these are also the top 3 points of the opponents. So it's really about providing information, convincing them, establishing boards, independent boards that advise, establishing stars that are kind of meaningful. So that would be a way to address the issues and concerns.
What kind of margins are we talking about that you could get a turnaround in that opinion, though? Is it worth spending the time and the money and the energy trying to convince those people, or leave them to it?
Yeah, as I said, this is an uphill battle, because the opponents, what we found out is that in their environment, in their social environment, they are really, the social environment is really against the games. So it's very hard to get them out of it and to convince them. So as I said, it's more to integrate them into communication, and they are not too much interested in the topic. So 68% of the surveyed people said that the hosting question is not really important for them.
Okay, wonderful. It's been really interesting. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sascha Schmidt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.